Hey there, welcome to the Renaissance English History Podcast, Tudor Minute, your mostly weekly dose of all things related to medieval and Renaissance England. And one thing I want to say is that today is January the 4th, and we're still in the Christmas time. We're still in the 12 days of Christmas. So for those of you who might have some post-holiday blues, I would like to remind you that the biggest holiday at court, the biggest Christmas time holiday at court wasn't Christmas, because Advent leading up to Christmas was a time of kind of quiet meditation, similar to Lent, perhaps, where you would meditate on the coming of Jesus and the coming of this infant baby Messiah, and you would celebrate it much more quietly. It was really a time of just kind of being peaceful and meditative. But then you would have New Year's gifts, and then you would have Twelfth Night. The 12 days of Christmas culminated in Twelfth Night on the 6th of January. And I have to say, I live in Spain right now, and the big holiday here isn't actually Christmas. The kids mostly get their presents on January the 6th. And a lot of kids now, because of the cultural imports of Santa Claus and stuff, get half and half. So they'll get some presents on Christmas and some presents on January the 6th. But the big deal, like when you go to the post office, they have the little letter box, and it's not to write letters to Santa, it's to write letters to the Three Kings. And so there's, parades for the Three Kings, and you write your letters to the Three Kings, and on January 5th, tomorrow night, the Three Kings are going to come. So if you have post-holiday blues, you don't have to. It's not over yet. There's still 2 more days of Christmas, and you can give each other King's Day gifts. They have a king's ring, which is like this cake that has toys in it, like baked in, and different things mean that it's like good luck if you get one thing, and I don't know, it's all very interesting. I love the fact that everything's still decorated. The stores are still decorated. All the lights are still up in town. Everything's all decorated. It's so great. I love it. So that's a cool thing to know, is that if you really want to be authentic with your Tudor celebrations, it's still going on. And then the other thing I want to tell you about is medicine. So last night, my husband and I were watching episode 7 of The Tudors, because we're doing the podcast, the Watching the Tudors podcast. And it was the episode where it was the sweating sickness, and everybody died. Not everybody, but everybody got very sick, and there was this big case of the sweat in 1528, and that's what it was showing, and thousands and thousands of people died of the sweating sickness. And it made me write a note to myself this year. I definitely want to do an episode on Tudor medicine and on the way doctors would treat things. And it also reminds me, if you've read the Matthew Shardlake mysteries, his good friend, Matthew Shardlake's good friend, is a doctor, and he writes a lot about the way medicine was seen at that time. So I started looking into kind of Tudor medicine and just kind of writing a couple of notes to myself of things that I wanted to talk about when I work on that episode. And I found reference to this French surgeon. So at the time, people were barber surgeons. So you were a barber as well as a surgeon, because it basically meant that you were trained in how to use knives and like cut people's hair as well as cut their organs. That's how kind of primitive surgery was at the time. And one of the people who made leaps and bounds in moving that forward was a French guy who, I'm totally going to butcher his name because my French is just terrible. Terrible. I know, fermez la bouche, because that's what I was always being told in French class, because I talked too much, and the teacher would say, Heather, fermez la bouche. Close your mouth. And I also knew la toilette, s'il vous plaît, because that was the other way I would get out of French class, was going to the bathroom. So every class would be fermez la bouche and la toilette, s'il vous plaît. So that's like the extent of my ability to speak French. So the surgeon, his name was Ambroise Pare. I'm just going to call him Ambrose, because that's what I'm going to do. Ambroise Pare. And he was a French barber surgeon, and he lived for like 80 years. And he first started kind of moving forward in surgery when he was in a battle. It was the Battle of Milan in 1536. And he was about 25 at this point. And he saw soldiers kind of going through, and when they saw their compatriots who had been wounded, they would ask him, because he was a doctor, can anything be done for these men? And he would say, like, he generally said, no. There was this one person, he said, no, there's, he's going to die, there's nothing he can do. And the guy that asked him, the other soldier, took out his knife and slit their throats. And he was horrified by that. And they said, no, if it was us, we'd want to have that done to us. And it was like putting them out of their misery. And so that really kind of influenced his seeing of things. And he thought, like, there has to be a better way. And so he started kind of working on different kinds of surgeries. He started to learn about almost like infection, and he didn't have germ theory yet, but he was starting to realize that you could use different kinds of oils to keep infections from spreading. He used old Roman techniques. He ran out of a certain kind of oil at a battle one time, and he ran out of a certain kind of oil, and so he used egg whites and turpentine. And he was really worried that the soldiers were going to die, but then when he woke up in the morning, they all actually began to heal. And so he started using that. And so he started kind of pioneering this kind of thing. Something else that he did was he started working with obstetrics. He found ways of getting the babies out when babies were stuck. He showed that even that surgeons could do, it was called pedalic version, where if a head wasn't presenting itself properly, you could do a particular kind of operation to deliver the baby. In the past, what they would have done was dismember the child and bring the baby out piece by piece. And he found that you could actually do a particular kind of surgery. It wasn't yet forceps. Forceps wouldn't be for another 250 years, 200 years, something like that, several centuries. But it was another way of trying to save women's lives during labor and trying to save the infants' lives. So he worked throughout France for 8 decades. He was 80 when he died. One of his most famous experiments was, at the time, everybody thought that that there were these magic bezoar stones, and that they could cure any poison. And it was kind of like in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It was like a Sorcerer's Stone kind of thing, although it was like for poison. And so he said, well, I don't actually think that there's any truth to that. And he got the courts to agree to let him do an experiment on somebody who was sentenced to death. And so the person who was sentenced to death was a servant that was caught stealing cutlery, and they were sentenced to be hanged. And he said, well, how about if we do this? I'll poison you and we'll have you die that way. And what I'll do, though, is give you a bezoar stone right after you're poisoned, and we'll test to see if it cures. Because at the time they thought that, it would cure all poisons. And the guy was like, all right, I'll do that on condition that I'm freed after I'm cured from this poison. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So they all agreed to that. So they gave the guy some poison, and he was given the stone, and he died in agony 7 hours after he was poisoned. So it didn't work, and Pare became famous for proving that bezoar stones didn't cure all poisons. And so he was a really interesting guy. He was French, so he wasn't English, but he had a big impact on surgery and on kind of moving towards modern thinking about surgery and about medicine in general. And he's a really interesting guy. So I think that's it for this week. And thanks so much for watching, and happy 12th day of Christmas coming up. Well, happy 10th day of Christmas today. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.